Hey, I'm Rachel,
And I'm Amanda, and this is Beyond a Ballot.
powered by DoorDash. Welcome to the Beyond a Ballot podcast. Parliament is back in session, which means we have assembled our favorite back to Parliament experts, Kathleen Monk, Laura D'Angelo, and Amanda Galbraith, back with us for our first dinner party of the season. And luckily, this year, our friends at DoorDash have done us a solid, and they've actually provided dinner for the dinner party this time. What a joy!
Woo!
Woo! Thank you, DoorDash, for realizing that we had no food at these parties and making us that much more lovable. Let's dive into the stuff that we really care about, and that is the politics. So, Parliament is back. They came back last week. We had a wild week this week. Few changes since we've come back, namely the CASA agreement, the confidence and supply agreement between the NDP and the Liberals is no longer. We've had some confidence votes. Let's break it all down. My question to start is, we had you guys last year at the same time talking about Parliament resuming. What is different this year to you? How does it feel different from last year going back to Parliament? And maybe we'll start with the sitting government as per procedure. So, Laura, what do you think?
Honestly, everything feels different. I don't know if everyone feels the same, but it feels like everything's different, right? Even though we were in a minority government last year, the confidence and supply agreement gave a lot of stability to the government, or at least the idea for most Canadians that they're not going to have, a bunch of strangers with clipboards and iPads knocking on their door every night of the week. And that's gone, frankly. I know we're going to talk about confidence votes soon. Like, it's not like an election's tomorrow, but it's changed drastically. There's a lot more work that MPs actually have to do between themselves and across the aisle, which is also a really big change. I think last year it was really easy for MPs to be really siloed with their partisan colleagues, and that's actually not as easy this time around. And also, it's going to be tough to pass big things, right? We're going to see continuation of things like dental care and pharmacare, a few things that are already in the works, but we're not going to see a lot of new policy, which is very different than last year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, definitely. And then opposition, Amanda, what do you think?
Listen, I certainly think it's different. To Laura's point, there's less stability with the government as a whole. And yes, they will be doing less big things. I think that's good for the country, candidly. We don't need another national program spending $80 bazillion, even though I know we're going to talk about the Bloc stuff and their new ask, which I think is a $5 billion ask. Anyway, over five, something outrageous anyway, that will take. So I think the Conservative poll numbers are up, and so are their egos in the country. We're very puffy and happy with ourselves. So I think to my Conservative brethren, I hope we all, I know they're disciplined in the leader's office, certainly, but I think folks need to kind of calm down a little bit and stop measuring the drapes and that kind of stuff. Like, we're not moved in yet. There's a long road still. But I think this country certainly is frustrated, and you see that in the way the Conservatives are pushing for an election now. I also think the message discipline is different from the Conservatives. It's much more narrow, much more focused, and I think effective. And I think, candidly, as a partisan watcher, not an active person now, this is a bit like playoff football for me. Like, this is the fun stuff, right? Where there's brinksmanship and, the Bloc's back on the scene. A la Gilles Duceppe, as we were talking before. I think it's going to be really fun to watch.
Gilles Duceppe, for everybody's context, is the former Bloc leader, and he had these beautiful blue eyes, and everybody, as soon as he spoke to you in French with his blue eyes, everyone would just swoon at him. Or maybe it was just me. I don't know. But I love Gilles Duceppe. Not his politics, but the guy. Kathleen, what's happening with the NDP? A lot.
Sure, yeah, a lot. I mean, came out swinging, I guess, in August, ripped up the deal, unshackled from their low poll flying Liberals now to kind of hopefully carve out their own path towards the next election. In some ways, I want to take a different stance than Laura and Amanda did and say, in some ways, this September session opened in many ways similar to last year's, because if you rewind tape to a year ago, Do you remember how chaotic the opening of Parliament was last year? There was news of a domestic assassination and allegations against the Indian government. Then shortly after that, there was the kerfuffle in the House where the Speaker of the Chambers recognized an individual with a past that was associated with the Nazis, and therefore the big apology happened. And I mean, that was a really busy time on top of all the legislation and committee hearings that were happening. Recall they dragged forward the CEOs of the grocery stores. It was a busy time then too. And so I think most fundamentally, as Laura and Amanda have very clearly pointed out, that the change is the fact that we're now on the precipice of an election, right? Like potentially at any moment, any potential opposition day vote or a money bill could trigger an election. So anything that requires a vote of confidence in the Liberal government, right? So that's what it is. So votes happen like that on any money bill that happens. And it also happens when the opposition have the opportunity to put forward a motion that gets voted on. And the Conservatives have been very clear, as have the Bloc, that they'll be putting very challenging motions before the House to kind of try to get that to trigger that election. So yeah, we're definitely in kind of silly season, I think, here in Ottawa. And as I think I'm the only person that actually resides in Ottawa, so I can really tell you that it is silly season here in Ottawa. And but also in many ways to an old hat like myself, it feels a bit familiar. This minority government, elected in 2021, even the previous one that was also a minority elected in 2019 hasn't been acting like a minority because they've either had a crisis like COVID, which kind of created some stability within that second mandate that the Liberals had. And then in this third mandate the Liberals had, they've had the stability provided to them by Democrats as a dance partner that basically said that they would support the government. Now we're back to kind of traditional minority government territory where every day in the House is cut and thrust. And a lot of us have forgotten the muscle memory of that on how minority governments really operate. So I think people are trying to remember that. Oh yeah, this is how it works. That you really have to count bums in seats to make sure that everyone has the votes there. And that all of a sudden the government doesn't fall on a Friday afternoon because someone decided to call in sick. So it's going to be an interesting few months for sure.
Kathleen, I want to stay with you for a minute because I want to talk about the CASA agreement. Inquiring minds want to know, or maybe just liberal minds want to know, what is the plan? What is the NDP plan? Why now? Why at this juncture? There's been a lot of speculations about why he figuratively, literally ripped up the agreement or walked away from the dance partner. I would love to know from your perspective, why now?
Honestly, as someone who really wants to see benefits for Canadians, in some ways, I wish that Jagmeet Singh and the party had stayed with the deal a little bit longer. That's my personal opinion. But I can see as a strategist as to why they got out now. The deal had not been delivering the same kind of dividends at the same rate as it was when it was first signed back in March 2022. There were staff and there were elected folks that were more committed to the agenda back then. But remember, the whole confidence supply agreement is only 27 issues, right? Or policy sets that they were working on. And most of those had been worked through. And so New Democrats had to exit the deal at some point. And they didn't necessarily want to do it on a policy issue, like, for instance, pharmacare or division around that or something. They wanted to do it on a political rationale. And they felt that this was the time that they needed to separate from the Liberals. And I'll give you the reasons why, Amanda. It's because for a number of reasons, the by-elections that happened on September 16th, right, to make sure that riding in Elmwood, Transcona, and the one LaSalle, Imar, Verdun in Quebec, that those voters knew that New Democrats were creating some distance there from the Liberals. That's number one. And also, frankly, the provincial elections that we see happening throughout the country right now, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick. It was really important in those ridings, particularly in BC, which New Democrats want and plan to hold in that province. They have to make sure that they're not kind of saddled with kind of the federal Liberals, kind of the anchor of a weight that they are in terms of public opinion polling right now.
For sure. So Laura, if you're looking at this from your perspective, maybe mine too, I mean, the big question that everyone is asking is, can the Liberals now hold on until the end? What is your perspective on that at this juncture?
I don't think they hold on to the end. The end, just for all the listeners, being fall 2025. I don't think we make it to fall 2025. If I was a betting woman, which I am not, I would guess the spring. I think they can hold to the new year, and I think that's actually in most parties, except for the Conservatives' interest. And I think they've actually done some really smart things in the House of Commons specifically, where they've front-loaded opposition days this week, for example. So those confidence motions, those votes that could trigger an election are really early, which doesn't give the NDP and the Bloc a lot of incentive to vote. They're not quite ready. And I think if they can stick to that strategy over the next month and a half, which, you know, is going to get increasingly angsty and nervy for the Liberals, I think that they can probably hold until the spring, probably around the budget, and they'll probably try and do a late budget, would be my guess.
In the meantime, do some late night shows.
Just one or two.
Yeah. Jeez. Okay. Well, Amanda, I want to put that to you too, because the Conservatives, as we all remember, Pierre Poilievre wrote a letter to Jagmeet Singh asking him to rip up the confidence and supply agreement, and many on the Conservative side are attributing that to that letter from Pierre Poilievre. Why was this in the best interest of Conservatives for this massive divorce in Canadian politics?
I mean, I think there's a couple things. One is just the sooner an election, the better for the Conservatives, right? The Liberal numbers are in the tank. They want to run an election against Prime Minister Trudeau because they're more likely to win. I'm not confident even a replacement for him does much, but it certainly is better than what they've got. I think that the NDP don't have the money to run a campaign right now, and they know that. In particular because, I mean, my understanding, Kathleen can correct me, but NDP money is one big pot. So if you're also running provincial elections simultaneously with that, like, that's a lot. They don't have that outlay, I don't think. So that's the kind of complicating factor behind the scenes. And I mean, it's great to see 40s and popularity for Conservative. I mean, it almost never happens. So yeah. I think all of us are sort of like, when does this drop? Right. So the sooner the better. I think all those things make sense for the party. So we'll continue to see them push it. And we'll continue to see the other parties, push back to a certain extent. I think, again, candidly, the Bloc are some of the best at brinksmanship around this. They're shameless about this. So their move this week around, you have until the end of October to do these two. And if we see at any time you're not moving for it, we're triggering and we're done. They're going to probably force the NDP to swallow themselves whole in an effort to keep this government going, right? And that is going to be very complicated for Jagmeet Singh and for the other leaders provincially, which, as Kathleen points out, is, I think, a really big push point and pain point for the NDP, as it should be. Mm-hmm. So, Conservatives are a little bit in the catbird seat currently. That can change at any moment. And yeah, I think all the late night appearances in the world are not going to... are not going to change that. I love whether Harper goes on Corner Gas and
I know
Mysteries,
right?
I forgot about that.
It's a tale of two political parties, that's for sure, right? Nobody wants to talk to us in those places.
Can we please just quickly poll on that? Because I talked about this on CBC this week, that I couldn't believe that he went on this show in the middle of this crazy economic crisis that we're in Canada. And I got so much hate mail from Canadians that was like, why do you care? Why do you hate comedy? I don't hate comedy. I love comedy. I just like good policy and not mocking it on a global stage. Was I off on that? What do you think? Good idea?
Off on that. Yeah, that's my call. Because listen, lots of Canadians watch Stephen Colbert. Yeah. It's a great show. He was in New York I'm not defending Justin Trudeau. I'm just saying that if somebody asked my leader to go on that show, I would say yes. When you're weighing things out, if you're a political staffer, you want your leader to be asked to go on Stephen Colbert or, even better, James Corbyn, carpool karaoke. And you got to think about the leaders in this context, Rachel. Who wants to see Pierre Poilievre doing carpool karaoke with James Corbyn? Like
Nobody.
no one. Like no one.
I know, but isn't that the right message to be sending? That's why I would never advise any of my candidates to do something like that. But we have a
Listen, I'm
different
gonna tell you a
voting
story.
base.
Here's a little war
Yeah.
story. Okay, this is when we get
Oh,
into
I love
our
this.
old
I
war
love war
stories.
stories.
All
So
right.
I started in journalism before I moved into politics.
Okay.
So I was asked to go on the 2011 campaign with Jack Layton, who is the NDP leader at the time. And we were going to Canada AM, the precursor to Good Morning.
Your morning.
Your morning, sorry, on CTV. And I said, listen, the most popular segment on Canada AM is always the weather with Jeff. You got to do the weather with Jeff. And the producer's like, no, we just want to do an interview with Jack Layton, a political interview. I'm like, sure, we'll do the political interview, but we want to do the weather with Jeff too. That segment with Jeff, that weather segment, went international. It went viral. It was on the cover of German magazines. Like it ended up getting us being covered by Al Jazeera and all these other networks joining our plane. Like sometimes there are fun moments you can have in politics, and you have to take those risks. And I think, I'm not sure if the interview is that good. I've watched clips of it. I don't think it was a great interview. I think that I would have coached, Trudeau to be a bit looser and have a bit more fun as opposed to all talking pointy. But I think that those moments can punch through and can get to, frankly, lower information voters who are not as connected to politics, who may watch Stephen Colbert and may see the clip come through. And I think that's frankly what the Liberals who are trying to target.
Laura, I think that's interesting because we've been, I've been watching from the sidelines and seeing that Trudeau's been doing more podcasts and, he was in Toronto for TIFF and more maybe like social event type things. What do you think that that's part of the calculus and strategy, is to get him out of the traditional political arena and shows and get him more into these lifestyle venues where potentially, I guess the calculus is that he'll shine in those moments? What do you think, Laura?
I think that's 100% the calculus. I think it's also the calculus, get him out of the traditional, news, political talk shows, or, in the House of Commons, in the lobby, doing a quick press conference where it's really easy to just clip that. And most Canadians miss it unless they're watching the nightly news, frankly, and get them into a lifestyle area that's going to be clipped on social media as opposed to just for the nightly news, reach a whole different demographic of people who are not engaged. And, while we can probably all agree that most of the TIFF parties are not particularly every Canadian, it does humanize him when he's out there doing things that are not House of Commons, right? It makes him look like a real person out talking to other real people, even if that person is Stephen Colbert. And I think that there's something they're trying to get back to. I think they're trying to move him back to his campaign style. Love or hate Justin Trudeau, he is one of the best campaigners in Canada. That is probably his biggest strength. And I think they're trying to move him in that direction as opposed to the more traditional House of Commons incumbent direction.
Okay, Amanda, you get my back here. What do you think?
I think if I was the Liberals, I would have advised my leader to do it, mostly because he can't do an accountability interview right now. He cannot sit in front of a prominent major journalist in this country and not get asked repeatedly, why won't you resign? Why have you done this? Like, all those questions are uncomfortable. And he knows he's not going to get them from Stephen Colbert. And he's probably not going to get them from non-traditional media sources who are just so thrilled to have him there that they ask him about the weather and whatever else, right? Like, what that is that we can't do what we've been doing before. And and even some of the message, and I watched the whole thing because I also, like probably all of us, did endless media interviews in advance and then afterwards about the strategy behind it. It was more fodder for me than anyone else. The other weird I think thing they didn't count on is the last time that Colbert talked about the prime minister, he was making fun of him for doing blackface. So that clip ran 24 hours on major networks, at least in the GTA, in advance of him doing that interview, which to me is not a thing you want. That being said, he doesn't have a lot to lose if it humanizes him. And there was that viral clip. Unfortunately, I think to Kathleen's point, he was a bit stiff. And he didn't really get that. He sort of had the one dig about you should get universal health care. And that was like a bit of sat. I thought that worked.
Yeah.
So, and as a conservative, I just think that kind of our posture in the Canadian political spectrum, our leaders broadly, like we have to be super cautious about having fun in this way. People don't elect us because they want to go for a beer with us. They elect us because they want us to clean house or cut the budget or whatever, right? I think that was true with Stephen Harper. It was, I don't care if I can have a beer with him or not, but I trust the guy to run the country. And I feel like that's where people's heads are at, is that I don't care if I like him or not. I want someone to clean house. I mean, the other interesting thing, if you think about it from a communications perspective, is, yes, I agree. I think the prime minister does. If I was his team, I would for sure pull him out of the, like, and I love, Vashi Kapel's, for example, like, amazing interviewer. You don't want him to do that show right now, right? You want him to get out. But what the Conservatives, they don't do those shows either. But interestingly, Pierre's developed his own channel to broadcast directly, right? He does his own interviews, he does his own clips, he does his own, and that's a real unique thing we haven't seen to date in Canada, that he's organically grown over the last 20 years and is now leveraging to communicate out. And I think that is, that's something that the other leaders have yet to, I think, successfully replicate. Although, I would love to know about the production value behind the Jagmeet Singh Rip Her Up video, because that was a real, the music there was a real, it was like an Oscar level performance. But anyway, so I think it was a good shot for the Liberals to do it. I think they kind of half waffled it, but he's not hurt by it. Would be my assessment.
Okay, so let's talk about, I'm going to stay with you, Amanda, because I want to dive into this question of, everyone's hearing that there might be a federal election, and we had a confidence vote this week. It didn't pass. So we've scaved off an election for the week. But can you explain to the people that listen, that are hearing these media sound bites saying like, oh, we could be going to the polls. We could be going to the polls. What is Pierre doing in order to propel us closer to the polls? And why is he doing it?
I mean, he's being offered confidence vote timing by the Liberal government. So he's not self-engineering these confidence votes. The Liberals are actually engineering it themselves. So if they don't want to be on the precipice of an election, they cannot schedule 2 confidence votes the first week back of Parliament, right? They're front loading it for a reason, because they think no one's going to pull the trigger right now. And it causes distractions and noise. And it also probably, kind of crosses the NDP, right? Where slowly you're flanking them in on either side. Eventually the Bloc's not going to play ball. But I think what you're seeing the Conservatives do is continue to sit on a campaign footing. Very much, their axe the tax, build the homes, those key messages, real sharp sound bites. They'll continue to play brinksmanship because they don't have anything to lose by going. Whether the other parties, how they play this will be, I think, candidly is a much more fluid thing. I think Conservatives are going to keep doing exactly what they're doing, which is we need an election now and take every opportunity to force one. But it's going to be the NDP or the Bloc that candidly are the decision makers at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And so what is the NDP going to do, Kathleen?
Well, as Amanda just outlined, there are like 7 opposition days that the government has to allot. And so there are 5 that will go to the Conservatives because they're the biggest party. Then the Bloc gets 1 and New Democrats get 1. And so New Democrats' opposition day will come much later in the session. It won't come soon. So in terms of them putting forward an opposition day motion, I don't think we have to worry about that. We have to really more concern ourselves with how they're going to vote, which I think is the thrust of your question. And I think that they're going to vote. So they say, Jagmeet Singh has said that he's going to vote based on what the issue is. I mean, they've dismissed the Conservatives' opposition day vote is basically just theater and Pierre wanting to trigger an election. And I do think that there is risk to the Conservatives, although Amanda Galbraith is very good at spinning. And so she's good at framing it up as being a liberal choice. But really, the Conservatives do get to craft the wording and how they word it and put it forward. And so they are going to continue to put forward this kind of aggressive wording to try to trigger an election. And I do think that there is some risk for the Conservatives because they're not actually getting anything done. They basically say in one breath, Canada is broken. And then you look behind his shoulder and there's the hammer in which Pierre Poilievre himself is trying to break, stall, or make Parliament not work, right, for Canadians. And I think that there is a vulnerability there for Conservatives that if they continue to be kind of obstructionist, and basically stall and delay the work that Canadians really want done. Because we've seen from public opinion polls, this is not my opinion, but public opinion polls say that the majority of Canadians don't want an election. And the majority of Canadians want the parties to work together to get things done, to solve things like the affordability crisis.
Now a word from our title sponsor, DoorDash. Season 2 of Beyond a Ballot is officially powered by DoorDash. Just like we go beyond a ballot, DoorDash goes beyond delivery. DoorDash is committed to helping merchants reach new customers, providing Dashers with flexibility, and by helping everyday Canadians find more time for what matters most. Last week, we officially kicked off our partnership, and this week, we're excited to spotlight our first local business. We're headed to Toronto to learn more about a local favorite, OMG Cafe and Tapas. Here's what owner Ana Gonzalez had to say about working with DoorDash.
When customers take our food home, we want to experience the best food quality possible in the comfort of their own home. We signed up with DoorDash because they had a platform that could attach to our website and facilitate deliveries. DoorDash helps reach out to more customers that are not in the neighborhood. They want to try something new, and we can increase sales and reach more customers by having our presence with DoorDash.
Laura, I have to ask you about the elephant in the Liberal room, and that is the question of leadership. Especially, I know
Thanks,
that's our favorite question, isn't it? It's our favorite. I know. But after Biden's decision to step aside and allow Kamala Harris to take the reins, there's been a lot of cross-border comparison. And so the question comes up on the daily. And of course, the Liberals have had a hard time moving the needle in the polls. What is your take? You're deeply involved in politics. You have a good sense of the pulse of the Liberal Party. What is your take on leadership? Will Trudeau be the leader in the next election? Could there even be an opportunity to replace him as leader, given so much election volatility at this time?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple things there. One, I do think right now he stays on. I think that he is determined. I think the five of us watch a lot of politics. It is deeply personal to him, right? This is not just he's the leader and thinks it's the right thing to do. I think he really wants to take on Pierre Poilievre. I think he really, truly feels that the balance of Canada and Canada's policies and this sort of progressive Liberal vision of Canada is up to him right now. So I think it's a deeply personal thing for him that it is going to be tough for him to move past that. And I respect that, right? Whether or not he is the right leader is almost besides the point. I have a lot of respect for someone who is sticking to their principles on that. Is there time to do a leadership? I think one of the things we should take from Biden and Harris is that, yeah, if you want to make it work, you can make it work. True. You can do it, right? Like you can do it. Is it going to be messy? Absolutely. Is it going to be very hard? Yes, you can't argue that. But is it doable? It's absolutely doable. I think there would be a whole pile of questions around, this is really in the weeds, but around, could you actually replace the candidate without a vote? What are the mechanisms within the Liberal Party constitution? For people who are not really involved in partisan politics, all parties have constitutions and rules about how you elect leaders and how you nominate candidates. And that part, I think, could get really messy on the other end. It's similar to what we hear about Harris and Biden. But the thing I kept listening to all the coverage about Harris and Biden and the comparisons, everyone kept saying, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's obviously not the same. The prime minister is many decades younger. It is a very different situation. What is the same is that you can have those tight timelines, right? You can have a unfortunately, deeply unpopular leader and make a switch and still have an impact.
But the question is, who is Canada's Nancy Pelosi, Laura?
That is the question, Kathleen.
That's a great question. It's true. And Canada has no vice president. There's nobody really in the wings, right?
Exactly. Who is the Liberals' Kamala Harris? Right?
But remember, in the summer, when this discussion first started happening after the U.S. debate and Biden's performance, Kamala was not at the top of the list, right?
No,
we were talking about Gavin Newsom. We were talking about Gretchen Whitmer. We were talking about other candidates. And in fact, many people said that Kamala Harris would not be the best candidate. But what was unique, I think, fundamentally, and as political watchers, we all have to agree, was not only the speed at which Biden got taken out and made that decision, but also the speed with which the party unified behind the candidate, which was phenomenal. Because
Totally.
you had old party hacks like James Carville calling for a series of mini town halls and mini conventions to kind of mini primaries, to get to a candidate. But they didn't do any of that. They just all said, yep, she's our gal.
And Kathleen, I don't know about you, but everyone on this call is a staffer, has worked campaigns. The night that Biden said he was no longer running, I turned to my husband and I said, I feel so bad for every DNC staffer across the US right now, because you know exactly what's happening. There's the machine who's got to now pick up and really flip and make some form of a primary happen. But I also felt for the individual staffers. You know, every Harris staffer had 2 cell phones going, probably email, right? Trying to reach every single member to make this happen as quick as possible.
Let's talk about this in the context of Canadian Parliament. How, Amanda, does this play into the decision? How does the U.S. election play into the decisions that parties are making up here? And when we talk about the confidence votes, whether or not they'll vote in favor of them or not, or how the leaders are each positioning their own, how the parties are each positioning their own leaders.
I mean, I think there's probably 2 parts to this. I would say the only party I think really fixated on the U.S. election, as they should be, is the Liberal government, right? Because they need to plan for what a post-Trump or post-Harris world looks like, right? So they are rightly seized with that. At the same time, so I don't think the Conservatives give 2 flying fucks about it right now. I think they want to win, and then they'll deal with it when they get. That's a government problem, not an opposition problem, right? I think what they are probably slightly concerned about is the portrayal of their leader vis-a-vis President Trump and what that looks like. But as we've seen, he's popular in the U.S. Lots of people secretly want to vote for that man, and he may or may not be the next president of the United States. So I think they don't want to tie themselves closely, and he won't. But that's always been a bit of a bugaboo for conservatives for the 20 years I've been in politics. It was Harper and Bush and, whatever. You don't want to be close, but not too close.
Right.
So I think, and I'm not also convinced Canadians vote for their leaders here with an eye to who, we care about getting along with the U.S. But, for example, when Prime Minister, this is where I give marks to the Liberals here, their government did very well, working with the Trump administration early on. They had great ambassadors, McNaughton in place. They negotiated USMCA, did a very good job of it. They targeted key staffers. So I think they know what they're doing. So I think no matter what, if it's a Pierre government or a Justin Trudeau government again, or maybe it's a Jagmeet government, Kathleen, but I don't think that's going to happen. But Godspeed.
Crazier things have happened.
Maybe. So I don't think the equation really enters into us electorally. I think certainly it's a huge issue for the government, which I'm sure they're planning for. But if I just say what conservatives are focused on right now, it's probably vote ID. It's, lining up, bringing a whole bunch of money. What's our ad buy? That's the stuff and maybe helping the conservatives get elected in BC.
What are the conservatives afraid of right now? If you're Polyev, you're up by a landslide right now, but what are they worried about?
I would say I can only speak for myself. I think I'm a little worried that, what goes up must come down. And at some point that goes down. But I hope so there's the idea of peak too soon, but I do feel like there's momentum there and anger, and they've captured something that isn't going to be fixed by policy changes, or even I think as the economy stabilizes and inflation continues to come down. I still think Canadians have decided they want to get a divorce, and they're not reconciling with their past partner, right? So I think they're shopping for somebody else. I do worry as a staffer. I talked about this a little earlier, is we're measuring the windows to put the drapes up before we've even moved in. It's hey, I'm on my first date. I brought my wedding dress. I think we need to just calm down and go
That's
through
hilarious.
but there are folks in that, Jenny Byrne is the toughest, smartest woman I've ever met in politics. And that woman is not taking shit for granted, right? She'll work her ass off, and so will everybody around her. So I think there's certainly that. And I think the big fear would be, which we don't really talk about too much because we don't want it to happen, but if you do actually replace your leader and we have to run against somebody else, 1, it'll be less fun, but 2, you have an opportunity to reframe yourself as a party. I'm not sure if it's enough. And I don't think, to the point who's waiting in the wings, there's no real obvious choice there, but that is an option if the Liberals were to get themselves together. And when I talk to Liberals, and there's also a really interesting thing, and I don't know if Laura or Amanda can shed light on this, but like Toronto Liberals all tell me that he's going. He's just taking his time and we're letting him go on his own terms. Ottawa Liberals will tell me that he's staying, he's not leaving and whatever. So there shouldn't be I don't know if it's everybody's wishing for things based on their own self-interest, but there seems to be two tracks in this country that are happening at cocktail parties. So.
I think there's, Amanda, two sort of epicenters of Liberals talking to other senior members of government. And so you're getting all different messages all the time. Because as someone who lives in Ottawa, like Kathleen, all I hear is, he's staying, we're in, this is what's happening, right?
For the record, that's all I hear too, and I'm in Toronto, so I don't know. Kathleen, what? Okay, if that's the thing that worries the Conservatives, I don't want to ask what would worry the NDP, but what could change everything? What thing could be, if it's not the American election, what is the thing that could change the trajectory that we're on right now?
Well, first of all, the Conservatives tanking in the polls, that would definitely change, but how that would happen, I don't know. I guess just to build on Amanda's answer, I think when you're riding that high in the poll, you have to treat every poll, just say it's another rogue poll. Don't believe it. Keep working hard. Like keep your nose to the grindstone, like every day. And if you kind of lose that focus, and you start measuring the drapes or bringing out that wedding dress, as Amanda so colorfully said, you can get into trouble. I think to answer your question more directly, Amanda Alvaro, I would say that, obviously global instability would be something that would change, greater global instability than we have right now. Obviously there's concerns about a wider war in the Middle East, increased tensions as we go into the winter season between Ukraine and Russia. Those are always concerns for sure. What I don't think would change the dynamic is a change of leader. I think Amanda hit the nail on the head. I don't think that's scary to Conservatives. You know what I think keeps Conservatives up at night, which is kind of deviating from your question a bit, but to answer the former, is they do have enormous momentum right now. And their numbers are good. And no doubt it is a change election environment that we're facing right now if we're going to an election. But Jenny Byrne, the campaign director for the Conservatives, knows full well, or she should know, that those votes aren't locked in. That 42%, that 40%, that's not locked in. They have 30% that's always rock hard granite for the Conservatives, and that vote is theirs. And it's not moving. And no matter how many persuasion ads I or anyone else tries to put out, we're not going to move that 30%. But that other 12% that they've gained, these are former Green voters, Liberals, New Democrats that are now flirting with and considering and are making their voter choice around the Conservatives, can be shaken loose. My focus groups that I'm doing, the polling that I'm doing says, they can still be shaped on the idea of who Poilievre is. They certainly want change, and they certainly are frustrated with all the leaders. In fact, public domain polling says people are actually frustrated with all of our leaders. They don't like any of them. It's kind of a pox in all your houses. But there is still a chance to move those people. And I think if I was Jenny and the team, and you see some signs of this, I would be concerned about still the women's vote. And you see evidence of that in the House. When the House returned for this parliamentary session, you see a lot more women standing up than we have in previous sessions. Women like Michelle Rempel, who is an MP from Alberta, who frankly has been in the doghouse for the last number of years, not really allowed to speak, not really part of peers in her circle. And she got up. And she had done some fun stuff in the summer around Chrystia Freeland. And I think she was kind of got some credit for that. So she was up asking questions. Obviously, Melissa Lantsman, who's a very well-spoken MP from the Toronto area, up more and more as deputy leader. But I think they know they have a female problem. And that's why they're also bringing out Pierre Poilievre's wife. You're seeing more Anita, both in public statements and on her own channels, speaking out more. So how they could try to secure that vote, because women, frankly, of all age demographics, are still suspicious and see some risk in the research that I'm doing.
Anna, I think her name's Anna. Anna Poilievre, right?
Yes,
Anida.
Anida.
Yeah,
But they call her Anna, don't they? Nope. Okay. Well, we'll have to have her on to clarify.
I'm pretty sure they call her Anna.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, Laura, the Liberals lost a by-election to the Bloc in Montreal. And how does actually, I'll open this to everybody. Let's talk about the Bloc, because to me, this is such a fascinating situation that is literally unfolding, the role that they're playing. So the Liberals lost this by-election. They are saying they did not vote with Pierre Poilievre on this motion, so they had the opportunity to say that the House had lost confidence in this prime minister. They say they need more time, and to keep the leader, Blanchette, has said, just wait a few weeks, give us more time. How is that playing out in terms of impacting this position and the strategy of the Liberals?
I think there's two different strategies. I think there's electoral strategy in Quebec and working the ground and looking at it from really a campaign and election perspective. And like, we can't mince words. Losing that seat was bad. That is the former Prime Minister Paul Martin's seat. It is not good.
Right.
And Quebec can decide elections, right? Like, a lot of the elections are determined in, the area around Toronto and in a huge chunk of Quebec. So it's pretty scary. But on the House side, what the Bloc are doing is really interesting and really fun. And I know Amanda Galbraith likes to talk about this, so I'll save some of it for her. But it is really cool to watch right now, because the Bloc have a lot of power and they're wielding it in a way that's really impressive. They've put a number of things on the table that they are demanding, not willing to negotiate on, demanding. They will vote against a confidence motion. They will not vote to keep the government in power if they don't get these things. That doesn't happen that often. It's really like, as politicos watching our Super Bowl, that's fun to watch.
So true. Absolutely. Okay. Kathleen, obviously, the NDP's relationship with the Bloc and some of the seats that both parties are going after in Quebec. What is the NDP camp thinking in terms of its positioning against the Bloc?
Well, it's been a long time since the NDP has been super competitive in a lot of seats in Quebec, really since the 2011 election. And since then, we've been losing ground there. But there are some Montreal seats, obviously, that we're competitive in. And we, really did grow our vote share in that last by-election. But what I think I would say is to ask folks to look at kind of the different opposition dance partners in a more strategic way. So it's interesting because the narrative has been around Jagmeet Singh as, he's been propping up like the Liberals, and that's unbecoming or of an opposition leader, or that he shouldn't actually work for the things to get policies or programs for Canadians. And instead he should just oppose Liberals. And I would argue that's wrong, right? That actually, I used this example the other day on radio. I'll just share it here. So people were concerned because Jagmeet Singh called Justin Trudeau weak and selfish and said that he had abandoned Canadians, and that's why he wasn't going to support his government anymore. So journalists rightly turned around and said, well, then why are you supporting him in this vote? You've got to clearly say no to this vote and not support his government. But I said, listen, my ex-husband is selfish. My ex-husband is weak. My ex-husband also abandoned us. That said, I still work with the guy. I got to work with the guy for the kids, right? These kids got to grow up. They got to have two parents. We got to do this stuff. And so sometimes, and if I'm allowed to swear, Amanda,
by all means,
seal, I would say sometimes you got to work with assholes to get stuff done. Like, it's just what it is. You got to work with people you don't like. And so I do that with my ex-husband. Sometimes Jagmeet's going to have to work with Trudeau. I mean, for goodness sakes, Yves-François Blanchet, the Bloc leader, called Justin Trudeau a viper a viper, a snake en français, là. And yet he's still voting for him, but we don't ask the same questions of Yves Francois Blanchet, because frankly, the rest of Canada is kind of always interested in the Bloc Québécois, because they're such a strange little party, because they only have to deal with this one region.
Right.
It's so easy. Yeah. They only have to worry about 75 seats. But honestly, like sometimes we have to flip it on its head. Like, why is it okay for the Bloc Québécois to support the Liberals and to eke out different measures, whether it's the seniors thing or something else on immigration, and it wasn't okay for Jagmeet Singh to get dental care or free birth control for women, right? Which is now possibly at risk, because Pierre Poilievre said just this week that he will not support the pharmacare bill. So that means he's basically denying reproductive choice, because there are girls out there that won't get their free birth control when we know that provinces have already agreed to that. So he's taking that away from young women, and I think that should be called out.
Talk about spin.
Yeah.
There. Amanda. Whoa. All right. Amanda.
That might be my favorite clip so far.
Yeah.
I'm going to play that. Whenever we're having a bad day, I'm going to play that clip.
That's okay. Amanda, the Bloc and the cons, like, what's the relationship there?
I mean, listen, I think the Conservatives want to defeat the government. We historically have shot on anybody that's worked in partnership with the Bloc, because they're separatists and try to rip the country apart and blah, blah, blah. And I think, you guys would, Kathleen would at least for sure been around, like the Gilles, like the handshake. That picture, right? We plastered that. That was a long time ago, but there was an agreement with, it was Stéphane Dion, Gilles Duceppe,
and Jack Layton.
Was it Layton? Yeah, it was Layton.
Yeah, it was the coalition attempt. Yeah,
2008.
The axis of evil, or whatever it is that we called it.
My career do-over moment.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. You didn't film the video of Stéphane Dion, so you're fine. Like, you're not responsible for that. So anyway, I think, we look on them and askance, and probably look down on anybody. But that being said, as a political, I admire the tactician of like, their brinksmanship is like top notch. I mean, he's laying it out. Like, this is candidly, like, this is what the NDP should have done. They should have just said, we want these two very clear things. You have until the end of October. If you don't do it, and that forces all the other parties either to, like, the Bloc, because the Bloc will figure out a way to vote with them as long as they feel like they want to, right? So I think that's what I was literally watched this thing. I was like, this is what the NDP should have done. They should have clearly laid it out. They should have given a 3-month timeline or whatever the hell that was. And instead now they're, again, being like, even the messaging around why they're voting for the motion, they waited until the Bloc came out and said something like more clear and clever. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, we don't want to do that either. You're right. Like, so I think I admire the Bloc, and also weirdly always have a crush on their leaders no matter what. And I don't know why.
Same. What's that about?
Totally. Gilles Duceppe was less obvious, and like, listeners should Google him, because he doesn't like look like you would, but any lady on the Hill, like, he was just very charismatic back in the day. So
the French, it's the French, the language of love.
Yeah, it's like when British people give us instructions on this, like, yes, I'll listen to you, my overlord. So anyway,
so
I digress.
I could not agree more. I
think one of the things Amanda touched on, though, is like, the Bloc don't seem to overthink it, right? They make a decision and they go for it, and they very much have a, like, that's future us problem. And it's kind of great to watch. Like, they punt it and they're ready to go.
That's why we love them.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
They make for good TV. How much time do we have, Rach?
We have like 2 minutes.
I have one. Do you have one also?
No, you take it.
Okay.
It's my gift to you.
Thank you. One of the things that people ask us all the time, because the leaders are men, is who in the parties that you are associated with, who are some of the women to watch? If you wanted to be, first of all, listeners, pay attention to these three, because they'll have a lot to say as we head into election season, and you can find them on your TV screens and on radio, and obviously in their social feeds. But when you're not listening to them and you really want to pay attention to some women in these parties, who are your picks for the ones to watch?
I'll do my obvious ones first while my colleagues write down, and then I may come back with a unsung hero.
Thank you.
If that works. I mean, the obvious ones I think for conservatives is when Jenny Byrne is, like, the GOAT for us. She was the first female campaign manager to bring in a majority government for Conservatives. She eats, sleeps, lives, and breathes this stuff. Super loyal friend, and just one of the best of this, and GOTV too.
She's good.
Anyway, she's quite a powerful force, and I'm grateful to have had her in my life and have her in my life, and I'm really excited to see what they do for the campaign. I would also say, again, we've called her out already, but Mel Landsman is another force to be reckoned with. Just her first term as an MP, but I think your star is only going to continue to rise, and it's great to see her up there kind of shining the way she should. And I'm going to stop talking now because I want to think of a non-super obvious female conservative that I would like to call out. So over to, and one of the, I would say a non-party thing. I actually interviewed Anne McGrath on my show on last week. And she was one, props to her because she's the principal secretary and they don't do media interviews. And she came on and talked about why the NDP made the decisions and was really great and amazing. And,
Love that.
So I'm just a cross-party call out. I think she's a super impressive person. And my fellow panelists here, of course.
I'll try to do a smattering of federal and provincial. So I would start federally with a look at Heather McPherson, who's a New Democratic MP from Alberta, from Edmonton area. She is currently the party's foreign affairs critic, so has been really involved, obviously, in terms of the current strife in the Middle East. But also, think about Heather for potential leadership contenders, if Jagmeet would stay away. So she'd be somebody to watch for sure. I would say provincially, I would cast eyes onto the Manitoba government, which in the NDP government there under Wab Kinew, that has a whole host of incredible female ministers, but a fun one to watch certainly was Nahanni Fontaine, who you should watch. She's amazing there. And then I got to give the biggest shout out to the campaign director in British Columbia for the New Democrats right now, my good friend and just political whiz, Marie Delamatia, communication savant and just genius. And she is going to crush this campaign and ensure that New Democrats maintain government in that province.
Love that.
We'll see. We'll see.
Interesting also had Heather McPherson and Mel Landsman, I think, from, the two opposition parties. They're two just really impressive women to watch, and they're really spicy, which I kind of love. I like listening to clips of them. I like that they're not apologetic. They're not afraid to push back and say what they think, even if I don't personally agree with it. In Liberal caucus, I am just always blown away by Karina Gould. I think Karina Gould is doing some really impressive, interesting things. She's very young. She has 2 young children, and she comes out she is always insightful. She's always on point. I think she actually works really well across the aisles. And I think she's really young. I think we should all watch her for a long time. Another talking head, like all of us, to pay attention to, I think, is Vandana Qatar-Miller. She's often on the CBC. She's on a bunch of different places. She has really interesting perspectives that are often really intersectional, which I really appreciate. I think she's one of the voices, one of the people lending a voice to parts of Canada that don't always get that right now. And the last one is the leader of the New Brunswick Liberal Party, Susan Holt, who is in an election right now. And it is touch and go, but she has a very real shot at winning and becoming the next premier. And they're doing some pretty interesting, exciting things with their campaign that I don't think many people expected.
A Liberal win. That would be nice. Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be nice, guys.
Would be nice for some. Okay. I was going to go back to Galbraith to see if you had any additions there, because I've been in your position where I can't think of anybody and then I remember.
You thought of good ones though.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
My other favorite conservative women who may or may not be actively campaigning right now, I think Karen Gordon is the shit, and anybody should work with her if they have a chance to. She does debate prep. She's one of the best at it. Larissa Waller just launched her own business. She used to be comms director to Doug Ford, also super smart. You'll see her on TV lots. And then I think shout to our fellow friend Melanie Parody, who also just had a baby and runs her own business.
Yes.
And is back working. So all very smart female conservatives. So
Melanie's been on our pod, as has Karina Gould. If you want to listen to that episode and listen to her talk about being a mom and a minister. But I think for you guys, we have to leave it there, which I'm so sad about. But we want to make sure you'll come back next year, right?
Absolutely.
If we're not in a campaign, if we're in a campaign, you can come back too and talk about it. But we're going to make this our yearly ritual.
Thank you so much. We're just going to thank these amazing guests. We're definitely going to get them back before the next election. We hope. You guys are awesome. We know they'll be back, and we'll be back with you next week. Thank you for listening. New episodes air every Friday.
Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and find us at beyondaballot.com.